Hello, hello, hello. um, so recently I have been reading pieces of a book that I showed recently called Psychology From Spirits to Psychotherapy: The Mind Through the Ages. And I'll do a book review on that soon, but it got me thinking about my own mind and my own journey with mental disorders. So I have Tourette Syndrome, and I've talked about that before on the channel, I think. If not, then there you go. And everyone knows what Tourette's is, I think. It's been made fun of a lot in the media, like in movies. It's always the person who's like yelling out cursing or barking like a dog. It's a lot of involuntary movements. And those glitches are usually called tics. So I'm lucky that as I've gotten older, my vocal tics are to a minimum. But I do have a lot of physical tics. Anywho, I thought about that and how it works with the craft for a lot of us. And again, I can only speak for me and for my experiences with Tourette syndrome. However, Tourette syndrome shows so many other symptoms that can be associated with ADD, ADHD, autism, a lot of things. So we're generalizing here for this video, but I think that in terms of spell work, this video is going to be all over the place, by the way, which goes with the theme of this video. So, in terms of spell work, I think sometimes if you are a witch or a pagan or whatever, when you go to cast a spell or when you go to make a circle, you may get distracted, right? And maybe you feel guilty about that or weird in some way. The idea of maybe like, okay, I want to go do magic, but the idea of doing magic is overwhelming because I've been told that I've got to, make a circle, like cast a circle, call the corners, invite these deities, lay out all these herbs, mix the herbs, light these candles, make sure the colors are right for the candles. And there's so much that goes into just making magic, supposedly, from what we've been told. And it has its place, I will say, to do magic in that way, to make it highly ritualistic. And in some ways, for some people, a repeated ritual actually helps with a mental disorder. I don't like to say mental illness because I'm not ill. Disorder is fine because I do understand that my brain might not be in these, might not be organized. That's what I'm trying to say. Like other people's, it is in disorder. That I understand and don't take offense to. But mental illness, I don't really like that. So anywho, continuing on this streams of consciousness. Yes, approaching magic can be daunting. And I think some ways to approach it in a different mindset is remember that all magic is magic, regardless of how it is performed. You do not have to perform magic in a certain way. You don't have to perform magic in the same way as your coven mates, your friends, people on the internet, people in books, or whatever. Magic looks different for every individual, and that's something that I think we need to normalize here in the magic community. So some people will tell you that you cannot do magic without casting a circle because you're letting harmful energies in. That's not my gospel. Like that's not true for me. I don't always cast a circle. I only do it sometimes. Now, with that said, I do have like permanent circles set up in my magic room here. Like I have levels of protection at all times that I periodically, usually quarterly, will add to or check on to make sure the energy is still vibing, But I don't always cast a circle. I do always invite my spirits, my gods, my guides, my ancestors, etc., even though I usually feel like they're always here anyway. But that just is very impromptu, off to the side. I'll just be like, hey, are y'all coming? Like, hey, y'all come here. Like a little prayer. I don't make a big grand thing of it. Now, at this point, you're already a few seconds into magic, and you may be getting distracted. So, I like to do magic in quick, bite-sized, actions sometimes. So instead of doing this sprawling ritual for 10 to 15, 20 minutes or more, sometimes I will just come in, light a candle. In my mind, I'm just saying like, hey, you guys, hey, this is what I'm doing. Hi, hello, everyone come here, please. To my, my peoples. Light the candles. Don't really worry about the colors. I just go off instinct immediately, like, this feels right. I'm grabbing this one. Don't overthink it. Light the candles. Light a little cone of incense. And just say, look, this is what I want today. Sorry, someone's passing by, and I always like to take a moment to just like send them positive energy. Because you don't know. Anyway. This live is very chaotic, and it's so perfect for this theme. Oh my gosh. Anyway. So, yes. So we light the candles, light a little incense. I just kind of say, this is what I want to do. This is my intention for today. I might not do any more than just this simple prayer, but I hope this is enough. This is my intention. And I think as long as you approach something like that with pure intent, it usually works out. Magic is not that complicated, at least for me. Sometimes that's all I do. Sometimes instead of giving myself a full card reading, I'll just pull one card or one ogham or one rune, and that's it. And I just take that message. Sometimes I layer my magic. So I'll come in, light some candles, say what the intent is for, maybe get a little like excited and like actually put oils on them or herbs, cast a circle around the candle itself of herbs and salt, a mixture, and say out loud, I'll usually say, this candle is going to be here for several days. I don't know how many, but I'm going to layer my spell. So even if I blow out or put out this candle flame, the magic is not dispersed. I'm just putting that intent out there now. And I'll do a little thing, probably get distracted, sing a song, listen to music, maybe do a little stretching or dancing. And then I might come back to the candle and focus on my intent a little more. And then I'll usually have to go do something else. And maybe I come back the next day at a totally different time of day, probably. And I light the candle again. And I just say, hey, I'm back. I'm resuming the energy I wanted to put in on this. We're continuing that, please. Thank you. And so I'll do the same thing. I'll do card readings. I will do a guided meditation that usually takes less than 20 seconds. I just boom, cram as many little experiences in as I can within a very short amount of time, usually less than 3 minutes. And then I'm be done for the day again. And I will do that over the course of several days, however long I just feel like I should, until I come into this room one day and I feel the energy. Do you know what I mean? I'm a very like touch kind of person. So when I come in, if I can feel it and it feels thick and like boom, then I know my spell is ready. You will, I'm sure, interact with energy in a different way than me, but you probably, if you've been in this path for a while, you know how you perceive energies, and you know when energy is at the right level for you. And if it's not, like I said, I just keep doing it day after day, day after day. Okay. But more often than not, my magic is just very quick, and it's one day, probably less than 3 minutes, and I'm just like boom, 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 and I'm done. I'm done. And I have full confidence that the magic is done. Like, it doesn't have to be elaborate. I think that's a part of it too, is changing your mindset on what magic is and what magic should be. and I just spoke about this a little bit ago, but remember that magic is not, it's not finite, but it's what I'm trying to say is it's not like everyone else's, it doesn't have to be. I think it's important. Sorry, I was just looking at the comments. Feel free to comment. You can engage in this video. That's totally fine. And thank you for the likes. I appreciate that so much. The thumbs up are so important. So thank you. Anywho, if you're working in a group, hopefully you've disclosed to the group your situation. If it's that big of a deal, some of us with mental disorders, people don't even know that we have mental disorders. They don't know. And so it never even needs to be brought up. However, some of us cannot hide our mental disorders or affectations, and they should probably be disclosed to the individuals before we enter into the circle with said individuals. So, like if I have tics that are going to, again, tics are movements, unwanted movements or vocalizations from Tourette's syndrome. If I have tics that I know are going to interfere with the ritual, like if I know we are doing a ritual of silence, I need to probably say, hey, I'm going to do my best to be completely quiet. However, you may hear me breathing irregularly because that is a tic of mine. I will exhale irregularly. Like it will not be in a steady, like breathing in and out like we all do. It's going to be like breathing in and then very loudly you're going to hear me like it's just going to happen. It's going to happen. Also, the chuckles are going to happen. They're going to happen. You're also probably going to see me like doing this a lot. I'm not on drugs. It's just a tic. If that is distracting for the group, that's kind of on the group and not on you. So I think it's important to find a group that can be supportive and not be distracted by any tics or affectations that you may display during a magical setting. I do wonder what it would look like to be in a coven, a circle, or a grove of people who all have Tourette syndrome. That would be fascinating. I think also when we think about the history, we're jumping topics now. I think also when we think about the history of mental disorder in witchcraft or paganism as a whole, we see that people, especially with like schizophrenia, multiple types of schizophrenia out there, but people with schizophrenia, for example, were seen as sometimes in some cultures as in being affected by spirits, and usually in a positive or a negative way, or both, depending on how their schizophrenia was being displayed. And I kind of wish in the craft we could get back to that a little bit. I love modern science and I trust modern science and I almost said pharmacology. What am I trying to say? And modern medicine. I trust that, believe in it, value it. However, I think that approaching a mental disorder with a little bit of metaphysics can be very helpful. So very early on in my practice, I kind of decided to view myself as Buffy from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And I would have these guided kind of meditations where I would play metal music, heavy rock music. And I would envision myself stepping through usually this portal that was kind of like drawn in fire that was shaped like a fiery triangle. like that part of the hexagram, and I would step through it, and I would be in this world of fire and flame, sometimes other elements, but usually fire. And all in this world were versions of myself that looked grotesque, monstrous in some way. And I would slay them with a stake because I was being Buffy, right? And sometimes I noticed the more I did it, I would say I did this maybe over the course of like a summer, maybe longer. But the more I did it, the better I started feeling outside of that ritual. And I came to realize that, like, unconsciously, I think I was slaying my perceptions of my mental disorder, but then also I was kind of helping contain my mental disorder in a way, because I had removed myself from medication of my mental disorder. And I think that doing that, I did it like nightly. That was kind of my way of maintaining a healthy mental space for myself, was to slay bad parts of my mental space personified in this ritual. So that's something to think about. Sometimes medication is the key, though. But anyway, going back to the history of we as witches and pagans and magicians in the craft viewing mental disorders. Yes, sometimes they were seen as being plagued by otherworldly spirits. Maybe they thought you were cursed or hexed or whatever, and they would remedy that accordingly. But more often than not, in the research that I have done with cultures, they saw that person as able to see between worlds, and they were a special person, and they were held up in high regard as a magician or a priest or a shaman or whatever, a medicine man or woman, a conjure man. You pick a word. So I do think it's interesting that I think if you talk around on the internet with different types of pagans or magicians, you will find that most of us are queer in some way, that being LGBTQ plus. We are that, and or we have a history with ADD, ADHD, Tourette's, schizophrenia, depression, anxiety. A lot of us have that, one or the other or both. And I think that's fascinating. And I don't think that's new. I really don't. I think paganism and witchcraft as a whole has probably always attracted people like that, regardless of whether or not the community pushed them into that, like I said before, because they thought that was your calling because of your otherness. Again, I think this goes back to perceptions and how to change your perceptions on what you think about magic, paganism, and mental disorders. I think when you start to think of yourself as not mentally ill all the time, or even disordered, when you start to think of yourself as you, as a person who has these things about them that don't necessarily define them or just a part of them, I think you become a more powerful individual regardless of magic or not. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. Yes. I think this kind of reminds me of the concept of grace. That being like grace with yourself, learning to like forgive yourself for shortcomings, but grace meaning like, grace is really hard to define, actually. I went to a church sermon once many years ago where they tried to define grace and they couldn't. Like, it's a complicated thing, but it's all through like the Holy Bible. But anyway, grace with yourself for me would be like acceptance, forgiveness, going with the flow, being graceful, right, with yourself, and knowing that when you make a live video about a certain topic, you're going to jump all over the place. like that. And people can either jump on with it or not. yeah, I kind of I kind of covered every little thing I wanted to talk about. Um, Again, if you've just tuned in here in a little bit, this was spurred on by by me reading this book called Psychology from Spirits to Psychotherapy: The Mind Through the Ages. This book is really good. It was written by Anne Rooney. It was $5, like regular price. I suggest you go get it. It's fantastic. It's really fantastic. And I'm not done with it. I've been skipping around like someone with a mental disorder would do, and not reading it from front to back. And it's a delight, and I will be reviewing it soon once I read the whole thing. And perhaps for that video, I'll try to make a list of bullet points and follow it and organize the video, but probably not. So, oh, and that's another thing. Going back to when we were talking about ritual and spellcraft and things like that, I think that astral projection, the astral plane, is a great thing for people with mental disorders to explore. I made a video about the astral plane here on this channel, if you would like to go check that out. It's pretty recent. You can just scroll back and see it very quickly. If you don't know what the astral plane is, very quickly summed up, the astral plane is we'll say a dimension, a separate dimension, a dimension of the mind, devoted to the mind. It is a psychic plane of existence. And you can go there through all types of means. And once there, I think what's fascinating is that the astral plane itself will look different to every single individual because it is a psychic plane, a plane of the mind, of a mental space. We all have different mental spaces. So you influence the way that the astral plane looks to you. Does that make sense? Like, the astral plane is a mutable space that your mind informs you how it looks. So depending on your emotional state, your mental state, the astral plane will look different every time you go. It could be dark and scary. It could be happy and wonderful and peaceful. It can be both. Going to the astral plane informs you of your mental health. And I really do encourage everyone to do it, to invite that space in, go to that space regularly. Again, therapy is wonderful. Modern medicine is wonderful. And you should definitely seek them out if you really are struggling. I'm not a doctor or a therapist. However, I will say that I have probably saved myself a lot of money and time by just going to the astral plane and learning to kind of push my will onto the astral plane and shape it. Because that was kind of giving me almost like a placebo effect, I suppose. That was kind of giving me this placebo effect of getting better, of quieting my mind, of quieting my tics. Is very helpful. The astral plane is your best friend if you're a person with mental illness. Now, depression and anxiety. We've skirted around that this whole video. And we've mostly talked about ADD, ADHD, Tourette's, schizophrenia, those types of things. Depression and anxiety are a totally different animal. Well, I'll take that back. Anxiety can kind of be lumped in with what we've been talking about. Let's focus solely on depression. So, depression is a whole separate beast. And if you've been depressed or are depressed, you know. To someone who has never experienced depression can just seem like unhappiness, but it is way more than unhappiness. Depression is this beast that feeds itself. It grows and grows and kind of pulls you down. and it can seem like there's no way out, like no way out. And even worse, kind of can start to fall in love with your depression, and that makes it harder to get rid of. You can have depression for so long that you no longer know what it's like to not have depression. And therefore, getting rid of it doesn't even make sense to you. You're like, this is who I am. Like, depression is who I am. This is just my mental state. So that when happiness or positivity come along, you brush it away because you're not used to feeling those things. They can feel hurtful or invasive or what's the word I'm looking for? Like untrue. They can feel fake. Depression is like this thing that you fall in love with. It seduces you in a way. But it's very toxic because you know that you don't need it or want it. But at the same time, that's all you know. So you stick with it. So that's a whole separate beast from what we've talking about with this video. But you can jumpstart the beginnings of kind of shedding depression with astral plane exercises, which again, I talk about briefly in the video that I made called the astral plane. Imagination is also a powerful tool in your magic when you have a mental disorder. I think a lot of people get discouraged, regardless of whether you have a mental illness or not, or disorder. People get discouraged when they are not hearing the spirits, seeing the spirits, communing with spirits. They're like, well, I'm not seeing energies. I can't see chakras. I can't see auras. I can't go on vision quests. Like, that doesn't work for me. And people can get very upset. Imagination is where you need to go. I think a lot of us, we've been told that your imagination is fake, right? It's things that you're just making up. So therefore they're fake. They're not real. I think that is true, and that is also not true. Our imagination can be fake, but like dreams, which are not real, they are pulled from our real lives. Like every human that you see in your dream is a face of a person you've already seen in public, be them stranger or not, because our minds are incapable of making brand new faces. We have to pull features from everyone that we already know, which is fascinating and eerie. So therefore, that goes with imagination. Anything you can make up or create, no matter how outlandish and fantastical it sounds or seems, is being pulled in your mind from something that you've already experienced or seen. So therefore, in my opinion, imagination is its own realm of consciousness. It is a dimension that you can go and visit, much like the astral plane. And maybe it's a part of the astral plane. Imagination is a magical tool for me, and I've talked about that many times before on this channel as well. That is a way to jumpstart any ritual, I promise, especially in a group. When everyone can just add into a story or an experience, it starts to become more real. And that can be dangerous as well. We've seen that with a lot of modern religions. Christianity, I'm looking at you. Anywho, so you can feed on to a bad experience or a good experience with your imagination as a group or an individual. And if you're having trouble seeing colors, hearing spirits, and that's what you really want to do, you can start with imagination. And I think you'll find that you start to freak yourself out a little bit because the things that you start imagining and making up on purpose to help you with with the spell or ritual, well, if you start sharing those experiences with other people, you'll notice that they imagined the same things. So, and that gives you, credibility with yourself. You're like, okay, I'm doing something right here. Magic is real. So explore your imagination. As a child, if you played pretend, surely you remember how powerful that felt sometimes. Like you were no longer seeing what was in front of you. You were seeing what was in your mind. And you fully could smell it and hear it. You immersed yourself in it. And being pulled out of that playtime could be jarring, where you're like, what? I don't know, maybe that's just me. But yes, imagination is so powerful. To recap some of what we've talked about, imagination, powerful tool. You should go try it out. The astral plane, learn about it, read about it, go visit it. Learning to do magic very quickly. So, like we said, lighting the candle, boom, magic, boom, magic, boom, magic. Not feeling like you are bound to rules in your magic. Don't feel like you always have to cast a circle, do this, light this kind of color. Like, magic can be me coming in, lighting the candle, saying a prayer, and walking out. Done. Less than 30 seconds. That can be magic. The amount of time you spend in magic does not equate to the power of the magic. Now, certainly, sometimes the more you feed into a spell, the stronger it can be. But that's why we talked about doing short magic over the course of several days. Okay? Some of us don't have an hour to do one spell. Some of us do have 3 minutes every day to add to a spell every day and to just feed it and let it get bigger and bigger and bigger until we release the energy. Okay? You'll find out what works best for you. But I hope that your biggest takeaway from this is learning to rethink about the way you judge yourself in your magical practice. Comparing yourself to other witches and pagans is toxic and is never going to help you. As I said, redefine the way you do magic. Get creative. Use your imagination, literally. Go play. No one's around. You're going to feel foolish, but you're alone. Who cares? So, I'm going to hop off here. But I hope you found some of this interesting or insightful in some way. It was all over the place, keeping with this video. You read the title. Thank you very much. And I do encourage you to check out the other videos on my channel, of course. However, go check out my Facebook page, also called The Nerdy Warlock, or my Instagram. But check out my Facebook page, because there we can do readings together, you and I. You can book a tarot reading, an oracle reading, an Ogum reading, a rune reading. I'll do any of that for you. Very soon, I'm going to start doing playing cards as a reading option on there. So go over there, check that out. We can do live ones together, you and I, over Zoom or Skype or however you want to do it, Messenger. Or I can send you a pre-recorded message of your reading along with a written report. So I encourage you to go check that out. I'll read cards or items of whatever you want, about whatever you want. Also, recently, I started a shadow work themed reading. Now, I do prefer to do those live, but I understand some of us don't have money to just throw around. So if you want to do the $25 pre-recorded readings, that totally makes sense, and it's totally fine. But anywho, we're doing a shadow work themed thing over there where I help you jumpstart your shadow work and stay with you through the process and do regular check-ins. So I do encourage you to check that out as well. If you're just don't want to go visit the page and you want to know what it's about, you can always DM me on Instagram. You can tweet me at The Nerdy Warlock or message me on Facebook at The Nerdy Warlock and just ask me. That's fine too. You can comment on any of my videos if you want to know too, and I'll respond to you there. I'm very easy to get a hold of. So, thank you very much for watching and for understanding. And again, I hope you found it interesting. I hope you found some of it helpful. If there's something you want me to expand on that I talked about in this live, I will make a whole video about it if you would like. And I promise that your response will be structured and well thought out. So, thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.